to the BAM Pod. All right, welcome everybody into the BAM Pod. I'm your host, Big Ed, and on the line tonight, I have got the champion from Mohave Lake down in Arizona. I guess Arizona and Nevada, it's all right down the middle. But hey, this gentleman went out there and he put a working out there and he got it done. Karl Okerman, welcome into the show, man.
Thanks for having me on here. It's the first podcast I've done.
It is we had, inside joke right there. We had a little bit of a glitch. Something happened, something cut out, and we have to redo this thing, but that's okay. Everybody, you're going to get all the same information. Karl went out there, and it is a loaded field, man. These guys are not fishing against a bunch of chumps out there who don't know what they're doing. They are fishing against some of the best in the West. Karl stepped up, brought it up, and he won that event down there. We had some of the most ridiculous things go on. We had high winds on one day. We had rain and thunderstorms the second day. That was day 2 and day 3, because day 1 was absolutely amazingly beautiful. It was warm out there. It was great on the water. The fishing was pretty good. There were bags of fish. Mark Lassane got up on the stage, and in our pregame show, he talked about how it was going to take like 14, 15 pounds a day would be a great weight and everything. And fisherman after fisherman after fisherman came up and dropped 20 pounds on the stage, you including dropping a 19, a 20. You had some great weight out there. Let's talk a little bit about, how you did it out there, what you seen on that body of water. That was with the clear water like that and the way it went. Let's talk a little bit about how you did that and what your kind of ideas were going into not knowing that we were only have 4 days, 4 hours per day for day 2 and day 3. Let's just kick it off and say, Karl, how'd you do it out there, man?
So I didn't do much for research. Years past, all I knew is it was an amazing smallmouth fishery. And I knew that Bryant Smith won the U.S. Open out there. That's pretty much the only thing that I knew. I fished the other bodies of the Colorado River. I fished Powell, Meade, Havasu, and Martinez. Martinez last year, of course, during the tournament. And this is like the one that kind of filled in the gap. I heard this was way better than Lake Mead. I'm not a fan of Lake Mead, but I have to go back there and try to redeem myself someday. But this place was it was on fire. I didn't realize how good the fishing was going to be until I got out there and started fishing. So
yeah, last year you took a second place at Martinez. I'm trying to remember who won that thing. Was that Colby Pearson guy? I
it
believe
was it
that,
was.
one of your fellow Idaho brothers right there,
Yeah, I
Oh no,
think Colby's
he's from Oregon. He's from Oregon.
yeah.
That's right. You're from Idaho. He's from Oregon. But
Yeah,
it's it's the whole Northwest guys up there, and and then he goes up, and of course he goes to Almanor, wins there too. So it was quite the back-to-back thing, or no, not Almanor. He went up to yeah, was that the
yeah.
second one?
It was Almanor. He
Yeah,
won
it was
Almanor.
Almanor. That's right. He won the second back-to-back at Almanor.
Mhm.
It was just one of those things, man. And now, just putting the pressure on you. Now you Northwest guys, you got to win 2 in a row to actually make this thing, make it right. Boardman, Oregon's coming up, and I know we talked about, you would love to win on a Boardman, that or up there at Boardman. That's another one of your fisheries right there, smallmouth fishery. You talked about how much up in Idaho you like fishing for the smallmouth. Then you come all the way down here to the desert. You get down to Mohave. You're in Arizona. It's 95 degrees. On day 1, it's absolutely just one of those scorchers out there for us. Idaho, especially, that's another one. It's like it doesn't get, I lived in Idaho for a while, and it doesn't get all that hot all the time, but it gets warm once in a while, but nothing like what's down there, just dry, arid stuff. You get down to that lake, you got smallmouth fishing on the mind. Wow, that's not really, what you're kind of normal, you would normally think is good smallmouth fishing, but you're talking, it was good smallmouth fishing is what everybody told me out there, and I saw some of those ones coming across the scale. How did you approach going from like the Idaho, smallmouth down to the desert smallmouth?
So like I said, I didn't have any intel or nothing like that. I put the boat in the water, and I told myself in this tournament, I'm just gonna. There's a lot of times if you go out pre-fishing, you think you got a pattern, the conditions change, the fish move because smallmouth will move around. They might be over here off this point or off that flat, or I think a smallmouth. My buddy was doing some biologist work up in Idaho, and he said a smallmouth in 3 days will move 20 miles. So
Wow.
they chipped them, and they will move. And so sometimes it's hard to find them. Um, so I thought I had Pedro figured out, and I kind of went in with a little more confidence in what I thought, and it did not. It just kind of unraveled out there. But coming down here, I was like, okay, there's no pretty fishing. I know how to catch smallmouth. This is historically a great fishery from what I'd heard, years ago. So I turned on my Garmin electronics. I run two map chips. I run a Navionics chip and then a Garmin chip, and I also do live mapping. As soon as wherever I go fishing, as soon as the boat's in the water, flip the live mapping on, and that way when I'm out fishing, it will correct the mapping of what's really out there. But the mapping is pretty close. So I looked at an area that I was like, well, I'm going to start down here. So I noticed during blast off, everybody's going to the right. So I went out there and went to the left, pulled up to this point, um, put the troll motor down, and I kind of went that direction because the water temp I saw was about 63 degrees. And this kind of looked like an area that it should potentially hold fish. I got out there and I looked out and I saw Ish. Ish was out fishing this island out there, and I could hear him talking to another angler, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I got a 3 pounder," and I'm like, "Well, can't go over there and fish by Ish. It's an island and it's really small." So I just worked my way down the bank, and the sun wasn't up yet, and the sun just popped over the top, and I'm just kind of cruising down this rock bank and looked down the water, and I seen that smallie cruising down the bank, and I was like, okay. I said there are obviously a couple fish by the bank, and I follow the rock bank down, and it kind of turns into this little corner where there's this little bit of a cut. Picked up my drop shot rod, and just flipped it to an area that has a 5% chance of catching the fish. Flipped it out there and flipped the bail on my spinning rod, and it just sucked the line out of there and just started pulling drag. So I leaned back on it, fought the fish in, got it in. It was a keeper. It was 16 inches or something, and ran it through the score tracker, uploaded it, made the same exact cast. Same thing happened. Sucked the line out. I was like, okay, these guys are aggressive. And I figured, okay, if there's two fish in back-to-back cast, there must have been some kind of bed or something. Maybe there was fry garters. I don't know. I hadn't seen anything because the sun was just coming up. But what I did know is I had two fish, and I just started running that pattern down the bank. And I figured out I need to get in a certain depth range. And the water's obviously crystal clear down there, and the bare spots are like a turquoise color. So then there's grass in there too. So I was kind of fishing somewhere similar right in that area. And as I'm working my way down the bank, I'm pick up a fish here, pick up a fish there, and I'm working my way around, and I'm catching some more fish and some more. And then one of the camera boats catches up, they hop on, and Mark was on there with me, and he's like, the wind's gonna pick up. What are you gonna make for adjustments? And I was like, no, I'm gonna adjust accordingly. I come around this one little corner, and there's this long point I can see that's sticking out, and the wind's just ripping across this point. So I reach down, pick up a reaction bait, and I first cast, throw it out there, hook up, reel a fish in. I was like, Mark, that's how it's done, just like that. And he starts laughing, and I worked my way around. I can't remember how many I ended up with right through there. And then Mark took off. He's like, all right, we're gonna run up, watch some other people. And the wind just kind of stayed consistent. So I picked up that reaction bait and I caught some more fish. And the fish were varying anywhere from every fish that I caught was a minimum of 14 inches. I never caught any fish that were short. And I was getting numbers, and I was like, okay, this is good. And then I got in another spot and I caught one that was like a 3.7. I was like, okay, the quality's getting better. And I had no idea what kind of weight was going to come in. Um, not knowing how that place fishes, but I was like, well, I'm catching numbers. I'm going to stick with that. My goal for the day was to catch 20 at least. And I ran down some other banks, and I got on the one bank, and I ran that till you pretty much couldn't fish it anymore. Moved over to another bank. I caught two, like 14 and a half inch largemouth. And by then the wind was ripping pretty good. I moved down to another section that looked similar to where I caught that one that was three something. And I hooked a 4 pounder, and I was like, okay. So I worked my way down there, and I'm starting to catch bigger fish. And I was trying to duplicate that, looking at everything. And And I was like, all right, there's this other point back over here. And I ripped back over to this other point. And I made one cast to the lake side of it and didn't have nothing. I made a cast to to the cut side, and I caught like a 3.7 largemouth. And I was like, huh, that was kind of, I wasn't expecting that. So I start working my way down the bank, and I catch like a 4 pounder, and I'm like, okay. I said, we're on something now for catching largemouth, because I know at some point in the desert there's going to be a big one. And so I kept working my way down there, and I ended up catching 7 or 8 largemouth. And I was like, okay. So I pulled the boat back off. I had it on spot lock, grabbed the graph, and I just started scrolling through the map to try to duplicate that. And sadly, that was the only thing that I could make work for the largemouth, was that one location. It was about 300 yards, and there was largemouth in there. And then once I caught the last largemouth, there was decent smallmouth in there. And worked my way around. Then I started seeing fish that I wasn't catching. So I just mark them on the graph and just think, maybe on day 2 or something, those are the fish that I'll pick up. I'll try to focus more on there. Um, but yeah, I ended up day 1 with 20 keepers, had a little over 19 pounds.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a pretty good day. And as I'm loading the fish and I'm packing them up the ramp up to the scales, I hear 20 pounds, 20 pounds, 20 pounds. I'm like, what is going on out there? Like, I didn't think I had 19 pounds, but I thought I had 17 or something like that. But guys are bringing all these fish up, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not bringing in 21 pounds or 20 pounds or anything like that. But the guys that are producing the weights are the guys that typically catch they're good in areas like this. So got done with day 1, had 20 keepers, and then we got alert on our phones that day 2 we're going to get cut in half because of the weather
Yeah.
forecast. After day 1, I was in 6th place on the keeper count, and got the notification that the day was going to get cut in half. So I was like, okay. I said I need 10 because I was in 6th place. I need at least 10. I don't think anybody was catching them as fast as I was. Um, with this format and how this is ran, we use Tourney X, and I got on Tourney X on day 1 about 11:30, 12 o'clock, and I looked at the standings, and I noticed that I was leading on the standings. I understand that the lake's a long ways. There's a lot of people are out of service up there, but I looked at that, and I was like, I was leading. I was like, okay, I'm leading on the keeper count, and I looked down, and I was leading on weight, and I was like, all right, I'm not gonna look at that anymore. Like, I'm not getting rattled by just what's going on like that. I'm just gonna go fishing. I didn't look at that anymore. I just caught fish, and I entered them, and that's how the day ended up. Day 2 ran out. Um, I knew I needed to fish a little bit faster. I ran through some of the areas that I caught fish previously. There were some fish that I missed. I ran through those, tried to catch some of those, but I looked at my map and I noticed there was this cut that I missed. So fished through those sections, ran back over to this cut, and I kind of roll in there, and there was this little pocket in the back and had a bush overhanging. So I threw a reaction bait up there, and I caught a 14-inch, I think it's 14 and a half, 15-inch largemouth. Ran him through the score tracker, come around the corner, there's another little cut with a bush, threw over there, caught another largemouth. And I was like, okay. And so I'm cruising down there, and it's kind of getting in, looking like it's the terrain is looking more like the stuff I've been fishing. So I'm working my way up there. There's this rock outcropping. I cast my reaction bait over there, and I reeled nothing. And then I noticed this flat's like 18 feet deep, and it's a pretty big flat. So I just bombed her out in no man's land. And I'm just reeling and reeling and reeling. And I thought to myself, like, all right, we only got 4 hours a day. We're going to have to move. So while I'm thinking all this, and I'm still cranking on the handle, the rod loads up. And I swing back on it, and it doesn't move at all. And I'm like, what in the hell's going on here? And I was like, well, maybe it's a striper or something. I get it in. It was a 4.5 pound smallmouth. I was like, all right, all right. So that is something totally like off the wall. And then I started thinking, well, everything I've been fishing is just going fishing and catching fish all over the place.
Right.
So the rock outcropping, I made a couple more casts around there. I picked one up, and I picked another one up, and then 2 more after that. And I was like, a lot of my keepers came from this one little spot. And I was like, okay, so fresh water is a good thing. And I ran back over and ran through a couple little cuts, and I ended up with 9 keepers on day 2. And I was like, well, my goal was 10. I got 9. And I think after day 2, I was back in 6th place again. I didn't move up or down. I was just kind of staying consistent. I was kind of concerned that I needed one more fish. Like I didn't want to be, not make the day three because after watching the weather, I noticed that the weather was going to drastically change. Like
Mm.
I do know one thing: the guys down here, when the cold fronts come in, everybody starts freaking out. They're like, "Cold front's coming in; it's going to shut the fishing down." And I'm like, "If it's snowing, I'm going to wreck them. Like you're going to see me really throttle down on these things." But I knew that no matter what happened, I needed to get there, and that's what the goal was: is to get to day three with the way the weather conditions were.
Hey folks, Randall and I want to talk to you real quick about choosing the right electronics mount for your bass boat.
Mark and I have been partnered with Bass Boat Technologies from the very beginning, and we know the quality and effort that Van Foster has put into this company.
Custom, that's the one thing that I think about whenever I think of Bass Boat Technologies. Van Foster has spent years, not hours, years perfecting these mounts. He works with just about every bass boat company out there, most models for every bass boat company out there. He has spent the time working on these bass boats. So what you get is a custom fitted mount, not some mass produced universal mount for every bass boat out there. Van makes them custom fit for your bass boat.
Bass Boat Technologies also makes a lot of other custom parts. Seat pedestal plugs, tool holders, steering wheel spacers, and battery trays are all made with the same attention to detail that Bass Boat Technologies is known for.
Bass Boat Technologies is a vital part of our livelihood, and it's very important to your overall boating experience also.
Absolutely, and that's why we choose Bass Boat Technologies. Check them out at bassboattech.com. You'll be glad you did.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, there's a couple guys that I've talked to in the past that really like when the weather changes. Coming from up in, northern Idaho, I'm guessing that you're okay with fishing in that bad weather and, understanding how it works. It's a tough one to just think that you've got 4 hours. We are normally used to at least 8 hours. Those are the tournaments on the Super 60, especially is, 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours. And now you had basically had to go 3 days into 2 days and you had to make it work. You talk about the first day you come in and it's like, okay, I've got, you had good weight. I mean, 19 pounds, and you had good numbers. At any point, I guess a lot of people, did you care which one you were going to make it on? I mean, you were just trying to make it, but did the keeper count over the weight at some point? Did you just say, you know what, I think I need to make it on keeper count more than I need to make it on weight? Or were you just completely in your head going, you know what, I just don't care, I'm just going to go keep fishing?
So what I noticed after my first days, I come in, I had 19, I don't know, it was like lower 19s or something.
Right.
I had that, but I couldn't capitalize on five fish the same size. I had one small one. If I would have had one big one, I would have been up, broke 20 pounds with these guys. But I had one small fish, um, both days, and I couldn't call that out. But I was catching the quality of fish were around. I just needed to cover more water. It's one of those deals that,
Mm.
you run out of time, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Um, that's I think if I would have had more time on day two, I probably could have got my weight up in, higher 19s or something like that. But um, that's just kind of how it worked. And as fast as I was catching the fish and the consistency of the stuff that I was running, I was like, there's no way that I'm going to be able to focus on trying to catch 21 pounds to try to get in with weight. So I was like, I'm just going fishing. I'm going to read the map, find the spots, go fishing. And I don't know if anybody in the tournament ran more bank than I did, but I ran the bank for miles and miles and miles. And when I ran out of stuff that I could, fish, then I would pick up the trolling motor, move to another spot, and then I would run that for a mile and a half, and then I'd pick up and then go to another spot.
It's I'm trying to think about how to ask this question. So it's one of those ones where, you talked about, one of the things you said was, I didn't want to look back at Tourney X. And it's with this format the way it is, you don't want that in your head. Some guys are like, I got to know where I'm at every time. I got to know what's going on. And it gets into your head, and we talked about this, you're out there by yourself. You're, other than a camera boat showing up every once in a while, you're kind of out there on your own. You got to make these decisions. Not looking at Tourney X, I think, can be probably a better thing than actually watching it or trying to figure it out. Maybe checking it every once in a while. But it's one of those things that I look at and I see the way people catching fish. And on day one, you don't know what other people have weight wise. I mean, I think they're supposed to put it in the Tourney X, but I honestly don't watch Tourney X on it. It's just one of those things that I have too many other things I have to think about. But it's I look at you guys out there and it's like, okay, they got the weight, but you never know if someone's putting the actual weight in or if they're putting this in, so you can't go off of that. And like I said, when we first started this whole thing, and we're doing a pregame with Mark, and he's like 14. This is a guy who's fished these bodies of water before, and he's sitting there going, I don't know what they're doing, but 14, 15 pounds ought to be a really good weight. And then everybody's dropping 20s, and it's like, wow, that's crazy. Guys are coming in with that. And then you have this Tourney X thing, and that's part of the one of the things I think is the biggest factor with most guys. I don't remember how because I only have to see 60 other guys, but I don't know how 66 other guys. But there's like, how did you qualify? Did you qualify for day 3 on X or on weight?
I call it Tourney X on keepers. So
Okay,
after my first day, I had 20 the first day, and I think 9 the second day.
Okay, so you had 29 going in. You made it through. You made it through keeper count, and then you come up there, and we cut it, man. It's like, okay, guess what? Everybody's everybody's got the same. Everybody's starting, and it's funny because you talked about Brian Smith right there. He was leading going in weight wise into the whole thing, and in the end on day 3, it comes down to you and him. I mean, he's not weighed in. He's sitting in that hot chair, in that hot seat. First guy comes in, knocks him off. He's at the back of the pack. It's Karl Okerman sitting in a hot seat, and guy after guy after guy, man, is going down because you're sitting there. It's one of those questions, man. It's like, now you're looking at Brian Smith, a guy that he's won the U.S. Open there. He's got a good chance. He's been fishing well. He came into the whole thing leading on weight wise. We're on a day 3, which is only weight. Weight's the only thing that matters. How nervous were you when it's like, okay, you see him come up, you know what he's got to have, and you're watching him come across there?
Tackle Warehouse has been the premier online tackle shop since 2003, with a huge selection of not only the latest and greatest from the biggest brands, but the hard-to-find regional specialties as well. Tackle Warehouse. Click, save, fish.
I was nervous. I knew that Brian was going to be the guy to be, and the first 2 days he was comfortably bringing over 20 pounds of those scales. And I was like, if you're comfortably bringing him in, like, maybe he's got a couple waypoints or he's got a couple donkeys out there. And, when Ty got up on the stage, I talked to Ty, and he was telling me he had a mean mouth. And I was like, a mean mouth? And he's like, yeah, I got a mean mouth. I was like, well, how big is it? He's like, it's 6 pounds. And I was like, are you sure it's a mean mouth? He's like, oh, yeah, it's a mean mouth. And I was like, hey, we pull it out of the bag real quick. And he pulls it out, and I was like, that's not a mean mouth. He's like, well, how do you know? I said, that's just a large frame smallmouth. And he was like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you have, the 2-3 pound range, 3.5. When that fish hits 4, 5, they get a lot longer and they get a big belly on them. But once those fish hit 6, the frame gets a lot bigger on the fish. I've caught 6 or 7 7-pound smallmouth, and one that was 8. And when they start getting in that oversize, they look like they're Photoshop, but don't let them fool you. They're coconut eaters once they get that big. The fish, that fish that he caught was probably, 16 plus years old. It had a big mouth on it, and it was eating everything out there. You gotta have a lot of food to forage out there to feed something that big. But what I did notice was, if there's a 6-pounder in there, there's 7-pounders in there, and there's enough fish that size. I really think that you can weigh 25-pound bags out there. So I think what he was doing was he was finding something else out, and he really struggled with trying to get the fish. And he said, you fish super clean the first 2 days, and when you're fishing against this group of guys that we have, you have to get those fish in. If you get them to the side of the boat, they break off, they do a backflip, you try to grab them, and they roll over your arm, you try to cradle them. Like, you you cannot mess up at all with these guys, because if you lose that one fish, that fish might have cost you 50 grand.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean,
um,
it's funny that you say that because a lot of guys coming across the stage had that very same thing. They're like, oh, I had one come off, or I lost one, and you can't fish bad at all. Like you can't make a mistake. It's
right.
unfortunate. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it just shows the level of who you're fishing against, right? I mean, you are now one of those guys too. You've won now. You've taken that $50,000 home, so you are now one of those guys that they're going to be looking at. I say this every time when a guy wins, one of his very first events like this too. It's like you do realize that right now you just put a giant target on your back, right? You are a champion. You are the guys that they're going to be one of the guys that they're going to be looking for. And these guys, Ken Moss, Greg Gutierrez, Aaron Britt, I mean, these guys, they don't care.
Right.
They will go out there, beat you down, and just walk right over you again. So,
Oh yeah, yeah.
you can't, like
Those,
you said, you got to fish clean.
yeah, you have to fish clean, because these guys, they will literally run you over. You put certain guys in certain conditions, and they are the best guys on the West Coast in those conditions. Those techniques and stuff. And I'm mainly been living in Idaho, down in Auburn for work. So I don't have all the rest of the experience down here doing these certain techniques where that's the technique for the lake. So I got my techniques up there, and that's what I tied up coming down here. And I know that when I tie those up, and if that technique works, like, I'm going to run you over too. You just don't, I haven't done it yet. And it's finally happened, but winning a tournament like that is the momentum you need sometimes to really get going. So you taste a little bit of blood, and it's on. So,
Yeah, it's one of those things we look at, and I'll ask you this question because you coming from Idaho, we're gonna be heading over to Oregon. We're gonna be heading over to Boardman, Oregon next for the Super 60. We'll be up there, and it's probably not your home water, but it's really probably close to one that you fish a lot. One of the things that I saw at this event was there was Marty Lawrence, who lives 25 minutes away. There's Conrad Demekis is down there. You've got Cameron Carver down there. You've got this body of water. I'm not saying this is their 100% back, their home water or their back. They might fish other lakes, so I don't want to pigeonhole them into Mohave. But it's one of those things. I don't remember. I mean, Carver went home for sure on day two. There were just guys that didn't make it. What is it about fishing your home water that makes it so difficult? I mean, Mark Program went up there and was out for Almanor. He wasn't there. He didn't. It's like, what is it that makes it so hard?
I honestly think I got my home lake too. I've had times when I showed up and I'm paying my entry fee, and everybody was like, well, we're fishing for second. And I was like, I'm not on anything, guys. And they're like, yeah, that's what you say all the time. Then you come in, you beat us by 5 pounds. And I said, if the conditions are the way I fish them that I like to fish, yeah, we're going to do great. But every once in a while, the lake gets off a little bit, or it's something that I'm not used to fishing. I'll come in, I have 4 pounds. Normally I have 19, 20 pounds or something like that. But you take guys that have never fished those bodies of water, and like me going down to that lake, never being there. I'm fishing stuff that people probably wouldn't even, like, if you looked at my map and you take the locals and look at it and like, what is that guy doing? Like, the stuff that he's fishing is stuff that they're probably not fishing. And I've been beat on my home body of water. These guys from out of town showed up, and they caught an 8-pounder. I've been fishing that lake for 20 years and never caught an 8-pounder on that lake. They caught, I still, but they, caught a giant. I'm like, where the hell was that thing hanging out at? But, there's such a diverse group of guys that we're fishing with.
Right.
These guys will drag fish out of places that you wouldn't think a fish would live. And they're going to hurt your feelings at the scales when you get there. It's you get a big scoop of humbling pie when you get to the scales, and you're like, oh yeah, it was tough fishing, and you realize buddy next to you at the bump tank's got 6 more pounds than you do. Well, that's the caliber of people that we're fishing against now.
Hey, Northern California bass anglers, ready to elevate your fishing game? Ford Fairfield partners with Bass Angler Magazine to offer top-notch trucks tailored for your needs. Our simple pricing ensures a fair deal and exceptional service. We live and breathe bass fishing, participating in local tournaments to understand exactly what you need so you never miss a good bite. Visit Ford Fairfield today and let's hit the water together.
We've paired one of the most iconic hulls in the history of bass boats with a proven lineup of trusted accessories. We're bringing you best-in-class value and performance, leaving others in your wake. Turnkey value, turnkey performance. The Pantera 2 is an overachiever in the 19-foot category. Once you hit the throttle, you'll feel the rush, and there's no looking back.
Yeah, it's definitely there's definitely some good anglers out there on the water, that's for sure. And going down to these lakes, I think it's amazing. Going into the desert has been an eye-opener for me. I don't know what I had in my mind thinking when we started, like my Martinez. I got to go out and run some camera boat stuff, do different things out there like that. And it was so interesting to be driving around down there, seeing how crystal clear that water is, coming in, cutting into a tule bank, and it's like you cut into this tule bank, you go in for about a half a mile, and next thing you know, it's like, boom, you're on a lake. And it's like, where did this come from? And you're looking around, and these fish are just everywhere. Going out to Mohave right there, it was like just walking down the gangplank down to the docks, and you're looking around, and it's like, man, there's a 4-pounder sitting on a bed over there. There's a 3-pounder sitting on a bed over there. There's a 2, they were everywhere, here and there, where you could see them, and the water was crystal clear. When I think about that, I don't, but that's the kind of water that I feel like you have in Idaho. So,
yeah,
do you have that kind of, did any of this kind of play into your hands? Do you feel like when you went down there, it's like, you know what, I do kind of get this?
Yeah. So 100%, that's one of the first things I noticed was how clear the water was. And my home lake back home up in North Idaho, it's a glacier lake. In the fall they drop it 12 feet. And then in the springtime we have a huge runoff, so it cleans all the debris, all the stuff out of the lake, the reservoir system. Then they pull it up, a little after Memorial Weekend, and we have clear water. It's you get out in the lake, out off the rocks and stuff like that, you can see just as far as we could. You can see 35, 40 feet down the bottom. And I know a lot of the guys that fish the Delta were just freaked out because it was so clear. And I'm used to fishing that clear, so that the clarity of the water didn't bother me at all. But I just knew that I needed to get something figured out right away, or I wasn't going to make it to day 3. And within 8 minutes of fishing, I was starting to catch fish, so that part worked out.
You were talking about fishing reaction baits. You were talking about fishing, what was reaction your most, is that how you caught most of your fish, or was there other techniques? What was your main technique for catching fish out there? What was the bait that you were using?
So I had 2 different setups. Day 1, I had, I think, three casting rods and 5 spinning rods on there. Going the day before the tournament started, I sat down and was tying all my confidence baits, and I had other stuff in my mind that I was going to try if I wasn't picking up any fish. And I rifled through a couple different, techniques and stuff on day 1. Then on day 2, I just kind of zoned it in that I couldn't sit and fish with 10 different rods because it wasn't going to work for what I was trying to do. I could have tried 10 different rods and caught, 3 fish instead of 9 fish. So I focused on, fishing with a drop shot with a stick bait. And then I fished with a spinner bait with an X-Zone trailer, and that was working. It was working pretty good. I was running
Yeah, so like a Senko style bait.
Yeah, stick bait. Yep.
Okay. We talked, and this is kind of this is the part where people, don't we talked. We'll just say that we talked before the show, and we talked a little bit about, kind of understanding, when so many people say, and I like I said before, I think it was Time Manarola that came up there. I think I that said, when it's your time to win, it's your time to win, and I've asked this, I asked this for you before the show, did you kind of feel that going into this once you were day 3? It's like, did you feel, you know what, when it's your time to win, it's your time to win, and was that ever present for you on day 3?
I knew, looking at the forecast before the tournament started, looking at the Weather Channel and seeing the forecast, that I needed to put myself in for day 3. And that type of weather condition, the way it was cooling off 20, 25 degrees, the weather was coming in. I knew that that is my strength, and I needed to get there. And once I got there, I told myself I had some fish that I knew that were still in this one area. I had a good 5 fish that I think I could have caught. Probably would have taken me some time. I figured I could probably catch 14, 15 pounds. And I was just sitting there we're idling out there, and I was like, man, it's just decision time. You have to make a decision, and you just have to go to it. Polnick says you go 3, 2, 1, go. And that's what I did. I went 3, 2, 1, and I looked at my map, and I just started putting waypoints in an area I hadn't even seen yet. And I put 6 waypoints on there, and I was fishing down south the first 2 days, and I was going to go right. And the whole tournament I fished, I never even saw the other side of the lake. I never even drove over there. I stayed on one side of the lake, and I took off. And it was bumpy out there, and I ran out to where my farthest waypoint was, and I started out there. Hit a couple spots. I'm checking it out, looking at everything. I think the second or third spot, I had a fish come up off the bottom and blast my reaction bait, and never hooked up. But he hit like right under the bait. I didn't have a trailer hook on there. I didn't feel I needed a trailer hook because up till that fish, I had hooked every single fish that hit that thing. And I didn't lose any. If I set the hook on him, he come to the boat. Every single one of them. Like, they were getting a hold of that thing. So I was like, all right, nothing's hit like that come off the bottom, because I was fishing a lot shallower. And I noticed that, and I was like, well, maybe that was a striper. Because I was talking with Colby Pearson. He said he caught a 20-pound striper out there with, I think he said like 6-pound line or something. He had some bait or something. He fought the fish. I had to really wear it out to get his bait back. He had some special bait on there, but I was like, it's probably a striper. And so I hit a couple more spots, and like, I was really surprised that I had not caught a fish in the areas I was checking, but it looked a little bit different than what I was, catching the fish on. So I'm cruising back. I'm just about ready to make one of those decisions. Like, I need to run back down to those 5 fish that I know where they're at and get my 14, 15 pounds. I'm cruising along, and I'm watching my graph, and I just catch this hint of something on the graph, and I just kind of, back throttle off on the old Yamaha 250, and I look back and zoom in, and there's this real long point that sticks out. But if you're not watching the map, you're not going to see it.
Yeah, I wouldn't know it was there. It was something I had to zoom in on the map, and I noticed it was there. And I was like, okay, this definitely reminds me of home. This is something that I would fish. Like, I fish tons of stuff like this. So I pulled up. I noticed the top of it is about 22 feet to the top of the hump. I picked up my reaction bait. I bombed it over the top, panned my live scope over there, and a fish immediately come up off the bottom and just blasted my reaction bait. Ripped the trailer off. I didn't get the fish, and I was like, okay. There's obviously something there. I'm just going to kind of slide in there real easy, kind of keep my space from where that fish was. And I didn't see the fish anymore. And I got on the leading edge where the wind was blowing towards the front of that. And I was looking around. I saw some fish out in like 22, 25, 30 feet of water. And I cast it out. And I was like, the fish was gone. I was like, okay. So I'm looking around, find another fish a couple minutes later, and I cast out, and it's gone. And I was like, there's no way those things can even see the bait. Like, they are moving, and these fish are running around on this hump that I found, and they're in like fourth gear wide open on a dirt bike, just flying across this thing. So I had to start leading the fish that I was finding. I'd find them on the live scope, and I couldn't throw at all of them because they were all just going all over the place. And I found one, got lined up with it, threw my bait out there because it took a little bit for it to get to the bottom. Got to the bottom, swam right over there and grabbed it. So I set the hook, shoots right to the top, does like 3 backflips, and I'm just trying to ease the fish in. It looked like a really good one. I got it in, it was over 3, and I was like, I'm not leaving. Like this is the spot. And I'm gonna fish this spot as if it's the best spot in the whole lake. And I'm gonna try to catch every single fish here, and whatever happens, happens. But this is the spot. Because I'd already seen enough fish around there. I only needed 5 bites. And I had 4 hours to get 5 bites. So I got the one fish in. Camera boat shows up and hops on, and they were hanging out a little bit, and then they left. I didn't catch any fish. Mark shows up, and Mark hops on, and he's like, well, how's it going? I said, Mark, the other camera boat just left. And he's like, all right, well, we're going to hop on anyways. He's like, okay. So I'm hunting around looking for stuff, and he's asking me questions, and it's raining a little bit, sprinkling, and he's trying to clean the lens off, and I'm trying to get lined up on this fish, and the fish is setting up where I know I'm going to be able to get the bait in front of it. So I cast my bait out. I'm like, Mark, get ready. And he's like, I'm trying to clean the lens off. I was like, just get ready. And I set my graphs up at the console so he could see the live scope. And I'm running live scope on the front. And I don't know if he ended up getting exactly what happened, but it was like, it could have been a Garmin commercial for sure. Cause it was like, it's right there. Watch this, cast it out there, hits the bottom, sets the hook. Fish comes flying to the surface. Same thing, does like 3 backflips. I'm trying to keep its head down, and I fight it to the side, get it in. It's another one over 3. And it might have been a little bit more than that. Mark was out there, and I think Mark got a kick out of what was going on because he got to watch everything. Like, he's asking questions and stuff. But I'm really focused on, like, when you got a camera guy on you, it rattles you. And the first couple times I had a camera boat with me, like, it really threw me off. It's one thing if you got your buddy on the back. It's another thing if a guy's filming you, because some guys are used to filming. They do fine with it. It's just something you got to get used to, and I'm getting better with it. I caught 3 or 4 fish, and Mark was there, and I told him I needed one more. I had a little one, and another camera boat showed up. Caught another one, cold to fish. I told Mark, he's like, man, what do your other fish look like? He's like, you got a couple 4-pounders in there. And I was like, I know. I said, I needed like a 5 or 6 or something like that. And I said, if I can get that one kicker fish, like, you need a kicker fish. The lake back home, Coeur d'Alene, if you don't have a kicker fish, you're going to get your feelings hurt because you're not cashing a check without a kicker. You need something 7+. It's better if you got an 8 or something bigger than that. So Mark's like, all right, we got to get back set up. So he hops off the boat, and I'm hunting around out there, and I think I caught one other fish. I think I caught 6 or 7 fish off that one point. And then I got 20 minutes left, and I didn't really pay attention when I ran up there how far I was. I knew I was miles up the lake. I was like, 20 minutes, it's kind of bumpy. I said, I'm not going to chance it. I got a pretty decent bag, and I thought I had right around 18 pounds. And I take off, and it's starting to sprinkle a little bit, and all I got is my buck and bass bibs on. And so I'm ripping down there, and it's getting a little worse, and it's getting a whole bunch worse, and it's raining pretty good, and then it starts monsooning. And I pull up to this point where I caught a bunch of fish, and it's all on GoPro. I lift up my rod locker, and I like Batman swung my cape around, threw my top on, and picked up my reaction bait, turned the trolling motor on wide open, and just started casting in this side wind. And I had 5 minutes left, and I'm burning down there. And there was one fish that I saw roaming for 2 days, and I never caught him. And I knew he was in this one cut. And I was burning down the bank, and I come around the corner, and I had to like lead into the wind because the wind was so bad. And I was like, there's the rock. I said, that fish is going to be positioned like I told myself it was right there. And the water's just running off my hood. I could hardly even see to make the cast. And I cast into the wind, and it catches it, drifts it over, and it lands it like in the spot. And it was one of those things, what you just said, if it's your time, it's your time. I made like, 4 or 5 cranks on there. The fish hit, I set the hook, and the rod didn't move. And I'm like, all right. And then I could feel my arm moving, and I'm like, this is it. And the fish wasn't cooperating. He wasn't swimming over to the boat, so I drug him to the boat. And I knew that I had 5 minutes left to get to check in. I get him to the boat, and the fish cooperated when he got to the side of the boat. And I scooped him up, grabbed my scale, weighed him, and he was 3.5. That's what my scale said. And my other one was 3.3. And so I reached in, grabbed my small fish, and I had fin clips on him. And I dropped my fin clips, held the fish up, and I'm holding him up, and I gave him the old cowabunga sign like that in the GoPro. So somebody's got it somewhere. And threw the fish in the live well, picked up the troll motor, and was ripping back over to the check-in, got checked in, and literally won the tournament the last 5 minutes.
Big things are happening in Boardman, Oregon. At the heart of it all, the Boardman Chamber of Commerce and Boardman Community Development Association, working together to create opportunities, support local businesses, and build a thriving community. From new business growth to family-friendly events, workforce development, and expanding local resources, Boardman is making it happen. Looking to live, work, or invest in a growing community? Boardman is ready for you. Boardman's Community Development Association, strengthening Boardman's economy, one project at a time. That's awesome, man. That, and like you said, that is when it's your time, and you did that, with everything going on. Everything was so weird out there as far as the weather goes. I mean, it was first day, beautiful weather, 95 degrees. Everybody that's from California, Idaho, all this stuff, we were all standing out there going, man, it is freaking hot. Everybody in Arizona is going, this is just nice. It's not 120 yet. Trust me, you guys are enjoying great weather. And then we come in the next day is wind. It's cut down to 4 hours. We're cut down to 4 hours the second day. I said it on the stage many times, and I'm like, I thank them so much. And, for the department of the Parks Department giving us at least 4 hours, because, there's $50,000 on the line, $150,000 over for the entire field. There needed to be this tournament. It needed to go on. It needed to happen. You don't get that if Bryant Smith wins if we have to cancel the last day.
Yeah.
Yep. It's like that's how different this was. And trust me, Bryant was standing up there going, let's just go ahead and cancel it. Let's call it.
Oh, yeah.
But it is one of those things that, going out into this body of water, Mohave, the way it was, the amount of wind that we had on the first day was, nobody thought it was going to be windy. It was like, how is it going to blow? It's not going to blow. We got back to our room at 2:35, and it's like all of a sudden it was the 40-mile-per-hour wind. And it only lasted for a half hour. It's like, I don't understand it. Second day, the same thing. It only rained for like 20 minutes, but it was like, okay, leg's full. It's crazy to be that. You guys had to deal with that. You had to go out there. You did that for 2 shortened days. Again, like I said, you had your a 3-day tournament turned into a 2-day tournament, basically, because we're used to the 8. You're used to fishing on the 8 hours. You went out there. You did a great job, man. I mean, you did something against some of the best guys on the West Coast, and I say it every time I'm up there. Those guys may be the best in the West Coast, but they're also some of the best in the world, man. These are not guys. I mean, you got guys like Ishman Rowe, Bryant Smith, Christian Ostrander. These guys they're fishing all over, and they're fishing against some of what everybody wants to say is the best in the world. I'm sorry, but they come back here to fish and they don't win either. They still have to beat guys like you. They still have to beat these guys, the Conrad Demekises, the Colby Pearsons. I mean, these are not easy guys to go against. You did a great job out there. You brought home the $50,000. You brought home the great big trophy. You even got the great big check that Mark is, to hang on the wall right there that Mark's handing out now. So, I mean, you did a lot, man, and you beat out some of the best in the entire West. You beat out some of the best in the world, and dude, just congratulations on that. But we are 10 minutes into this. We got 10 minutes left, basically, on this deal. This is when I turn it over, and I'm like, you know what? Everybody just listen to Karl Okerman talk. If you don't know who he is, go find out. But I'm going to let him right now tell you how you can follow him on social media, how you can increase that game, start watching these guys, make them household names, share them with your friends. But Karl, tell everybody who you are a little bit and, what you got, man. This is your time.
All right, I'll start off. I got a personal page, Karl Okerman. Then I have a a professional page, Karl Okerman Fishing on Facebook, and I also have one on Instagram. Like and follow along, share everything that you see on there. If you got questions, reach out. I'll try to answer them the best I can. I'm working a bunch of hours at work, but if you ask me a question when I get a chance, I'll try to help you out with best I can. Tell you the stuff I was using, this and that. If you got, questions of where to fish, what to use, stuff like that. I mean, obviously I won't do it, for, one of my tournaments that's coming up or something like that, but anything else like that. So all of my fishing started, my dad took me fishing. So when I was a kid, my dad sat me down when I was really, really young. And he was like, he calls me Junior. He's like, Junior, come here. He's going to sit down and have a talk. And I said, okay. He's like, what do you want to do? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, what do you want to do for fun? He's like, I was like, well, what are the options? He's like, we can either hunt and fish or we're going to golf. And I was like, well, why the hell would we golf? And he's like, hunt and fishing it is. I said, all right. So ever since I could remember, sitting in a car seat, my dad was fishing down here at Nimbus in California, catching salmon. My Uncle Randy was out there, and that's, my first memories was out there doing that stuff. My Uncle Mark, he used to be a guide. Used to turkey hunt with Uncle Mark, spent a lot of time with my Uncle Mark, Aunt Mary Ann, Uncle Randy. And that's what I remember as a kid. We used to go camping in some of the lakes and stuff around here. I caught my first fish at Folsom. We used to go catfishing at night when I was a kid. Then we moved I was born in Sacramento, moved from there when I was 6, moved to Placerville. Mom and Dad built a house. And then we started pond fishing. Went out to the first pond, and that's where I caught my first bass. I caught it on a line through rubber worm on a bobber on our close friend's Brad's rod. My dad was young, and he was catching largemouth down around the corner. So Brad ran down there around the corner, and Brad handed me the rod. He's like, here, I'm getting a bite. Well, all I was doing was catching bluegill. I used to mow lawns and stuff to catch, buy a tub of worms for $1. And, I just bobber fishing, catching bluegill and stuff, but I hadn't caught a bass. Caught a bass on Brad's rod. My buddy Dusty that I grew up with, anytime we went fishing, Dusty was always there. And caught my first bass, 4-pounder in this little lake. And then we had some friends. One thing about California is there's a lot of private lakes. There's a lot of private lakes with really big fish in them. But in California, people don't let you fish their little private lakes. So you got to know people. So my mom had a daycare, and these couple girls I grew up with, Megan and Jessica, their dad's name was Tom. Tom was a contractor, and he knew everybody. So Tom had access to this private lake. And so he's like, hey, we're going to go fishing. I'm like, yep, let's go. I told Dad, I was like, Dad, Tom said we can go fishing. We had to do I think we're helping putting a sprinkler line in or something at his house. And I was asking all day, can we go? It's the time to go. He's like, when the sprinkler's done. And we did a bunch of work there, and we run up there, and this private pond always had a canoe, and the canoe was just big enough for 3 people, but I never got to go in the canoe. I had to bank fish. So I'd walk down the bank, and I got on this dock with Dusty, and Tom and Bob and my dad would go out on this canoe, and they would just be wrecking the largemouth out there. And I would go out on the dock, and I was catching 3 or 4 pounders. I'd catch a whole bunch of them in the evening. And I remember as a kid, I was so mad when my dad told me we had to leave. I didn't understand why we couldn't catch them in the dark, but I can catch them in the dark now, but I couldn't back then. So we were fishing that. And then there's another, that lake, present day, I'm working down here in Auburn. I ran over there to go look at the lake, and I was going to go up there and talk to somebody around the lake to see if I can get permission to fish that thing. Cause I was like, there's gotta be 12 pounders in this lake. If nobody did anything to it, like killed all the fish. And I come ripping up over the hill, and I knew exactly where it was. And I come over the hill, and the lake is bone dry. There is no water at all. And it just kind of deflated my balloon I had. Like I had these high hopes to go fish one of the funnest lakes I ever got to fish. And so I turned around, left or whatever. But we moved when I was 12. We moved to Idaho, and I primarily just fished bass down here. I had a float tube down here, and one of the gated communities was called Greenstone. And I caught my biggest fish out there. I caught it like a 26-inch largemouth out there out of my float tube. And I was fishing with my buddy Josh and his dad. And my dad was out there, and like the place had just giant fish in there. I was one day I was out there fishing. I had Roland Martin's helicopter lure. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but
I do.
I never hooked one fish except for one on that lake, and it snapped me off like it was nothing. And I watched that fish jump out there with the helicopter lure hanging out of its mouth and never got it in, but it was a fun lake. If anybody's got the gate code to get in that gated community, let me know. I'll take you fishing out there because I knew where to catch them out there. So fast forward, moved to Idaho, and I get up to Idaho, and the bass fishing at the time, I'd catch one or two bass in the spring, and then I wouldn't catch nothing. So I kind of switched all my tackle over, and I was really bummed because all I wanted to do was just bass fish. And started catching trout, spinners and different stuff, trolling. I mean, it was all right, jigging from Mackinac, stuff like that. And they're up there. The water's crystal clear. The only difference is you catch trout, you can eat them, and they're really good eating up there. And I can remember doing all that stuff, and I still had all my bass stuff, but I had its own tackle box, and I picked up fly fishing, and I was fishing some of the streams up there, and that was a good time. And as I got into high school, friends of mine were like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna skip school and go bass fishing," and I was like, "Where are you guys catching bass?" They're like, "Right here," and I'm like, "Oh," I was like, "Well, I know where that is," and I actually got caught by my mom going bass fishing because she worked at the bank and saw my truck driving down the road, and I skipped basically from lunchtime. We just said, "Yeah, we're going bass fishing," and one of my buddies, Tyler, his grandpa made tube baits, hand poured tube baits, and I still have some. I don't know if his grandpa's name was Chuck. Hell of a guy, super nice. He had all these jigs and he was hand pouring worms and everything. And when I first went over there and met the guy, he was making these pig and jigs, and I didn't even know what a pig and jig was. My buddy Tyler showed me, and he was making his own jigs. And I finally started, working and having a little cash. I'd go over there and give him like 20 or 40 bucks. And he's like, "What do you want?" I said, "Whatever they're biting on." And he had a little, like a little bass tracker or something. And he had all these pictures and stuff. And he used to fish in California bass fishing tournaments. And I would buy his baits, and he'd be in a brown paper sack, and I had brown paper sacks everywhere. But I would go out fishing, and I was using his jigs and his tube baits and just really putting the beat down. And so every spring, I'd go in there and I'd buy more baits from him. And I got a couple boxes full of his baits, but there's a couple specific colors that I used all of them on. And I won my very first bass tournament. I weighed 18 something on that one color, and I can't get him anymore. And I've tried calling Tyler, and Tyler's like, "Well, my grandpa, he gave me all of his stuff. My uncle's got some of it." And I'm like, "No, that's not what I'm asking. Like, I need this color. Like, what this is. Like, this is a winning color." I said, "I will buy like $300 worth of these baits." And there's a couple people back home. One other guy's Greg Edwards. He got into airbrush and crankbaits. And what I noticed is his crankbaits sound different. And I don't know, I think he posted a picture on Facebook, and I'm like, "Hey," I was like, what is that?" And he's like, "Well, it's a custom one." I said, "Are you selling them?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "Well, what do you got?" And he started showing me pictures. Well, I bought a bunch of his crankbaits. And I showed up, and we were fishing a ABA tournament, and I had my fishing partner with me. We showed up, and I told my buddy, I said, he's like, "Where are we going?" I was like, "Just get on the back of the boat." I said, "We're going fishing." We pulled up to the spot, and we were strictly throwing his custom ones that had a different color. And we won both days. Like, just hammered the fish out there. And so it's kind of a little hush hush thing, but Greg will probably be mad. I don't know, Greg, maybe you'll sell some crankbaits over it, but Greg's a great guy. The first bass club I joined, Greg's a part of it. And Joe and Kenny, just a small little club up north, started fishing that. My buddy Reggie took me out for my first bass tournament up at Priest Lake. That's known as a trophy trout lake. Our state record, Mackinac, is 57 pounds up there, but it's got smallmouth in there, and it's a good time. First tournament I fished, I was one spot out of the money the first time. I was lucky enough, my buddy Reggie took me out the rest of the year. I got to fish off the back of his boat in a little Ranger. We did all right. We didn't win any tournaments or nothing like that. The next year I bought a boat, and I was like, I'm going to catch them. I can catch them in the spring. Well, I didn't realize I couldn't catch the largemouth in the summertime. And so on our body of water, Ponderay back up in Idaho, you're allowed 2 largemouth over 16 inches, and then you have to catch 3 smallmouth, or you can catch, 5 smallies. So I just quit fishing for largemouth altogether and strictly, primarily focused on catching smallmouth. And our fishery is so strong now that you can really win every tournament catching smallmouth. Now there's enough big ones in there to do it. It's just, I would go out there in the worst conditions. I was telling my buddy that I went out in like February and I was catching bass. My buddy Don Hull. I've learned a lot from this guy. If you ever get a chance to fish with him, he's won 2 boats. Him and his buddy back there, Matt Cole. But Donnie's a guy. I met him at the tackle shop and I was fishing around him, and he's like, I'm gonna fish this tournament and stuff. And I was like, okay. And he's like, we'll take your boat. I was like, all right, right on. So I get on the front and I got a jig and we're flipping these bushes. He's in the back of the boat at a horrible angle and just skips this jig all the way to the back of this bush. And I was like, yeah, he got lucky. Like, nobody can skip like that. He looks like he's skipping like Hackney. And we roll up to the next spot and he skips to the back and the bush just blows up and he rips this bass out of there. I just set my jig rod down and picked up a Senko. I just started throwing Senkos at the front of the bushes because he was catching everything. And Donnie has taught me a ton about fishing. He's an amazing guy. My other fishing partner was Eric, Mr. Thompson. We fished a lot of the team events together. We won everything up there. A good portion of the tournaments. Eric just wouldn't go fish the bigger tournaments and like branch out with that stuff. He liked fishing the local stuff. And so that's kind of, once I won a bunch of events and stuff around there, I wanted to go further, and he didn't want to travel with that stuff. He works a lot and he owns his own business and he does well for himself. But I wanted to see what I could do. And I told myself I was going to get a new boat with electronics because I didn't have one. Bought a new boat and I won. I got second in a tournament. Next day I took first. A couple days later, they had a big open up there. I won that with smallmouth. I had 26.05 or I don't know, 26 something with smallmouth at a 7-pounder, big fish. That tournament had never been won with smallmouth before. And I broke my PB every cast. Like when we were fishing, my buddy Eric was my partner, and I'm glad he was my partner because he can run the net well. He didn't catch one fish. He netted all the fish. And he's like, I'm glad we're partners. He's like, I'll run that net all day long after catching fish like that. And yeah, so those are pretty much the guys I fished with back home. Learned a lot from them. Fished potholes, got some top 10s up there and stuff. The tournaments that Russ Baker puts on at Limit Out Marine. Yeah. Then I started branching off down fishing the pro-ams. First year I fished, got my teeth kicked in, and it was just humbling to see. I thought it was just the knowledge that these guys have been fishing 25, 30 years or 40 years. I don't know how long Gutierrez has been fishing Shasta forever. Michael's like, if you beat that guy, like any of those guys, any of the guys I'm competing against now, like that's an accomplishment because you can't beat those guys. And I just was trying to figure out, I was like, man, maybe it's just knowledge. Like they know this or know that. And I've just done a ton of work. Second year I come out for pro-ams. I was fishing Clear Lake, and it was day 2 and a cold front came in. It was raining, and my co-angler was just having a meltdown, just freaking out that we were going to come in with nothing. And I was like, what are you freaking out for? And he's like, we're not going to catch him. I was like, what do you mean we're not going to catch him? He's like, this is California. When the cold front comes in, it shuts him down. I said, bud, we're going to catch him. He's like, why do you think we're going to catch him? I said, because I can catch bass in 37-degree water temperature. And we run around and fish all over. I got another spot. I caught a bunch of fish, run over there, and there's like 60 people in this spot. And I was like, well, this isn't going to work. So run over to this other spot. And I noticed on day 1, I ran over there and the water was clear, but the storm had changed the water clarity. And during practice, I rolled the fish off, and it was like a 5-pounder right by the side of the boat. So I pulled up, made one cast, made another cast, caught a 5.5 pounder. And I'm like, oh yeah. I said, they're back in here. It's the watercolor that was, that's why I didn't get any the first day. So we sat out there, grounded out, and we had 23.5 pounds coming in, and I was like 0.03 for making the top 10. So we go up to the Columbia River after that in the Pro-Am, had a top 10 there, had a okay finish down on the Delta, and I think I got 5th place or something in the Pro-Ams. That qualified me to fish Apex, and that kind of dissolved. And a lot of people didn't, that really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And it really rubbed me the wrong way because a lot of my money was taken, and
Yeah.
I never got any of it back. And it was sad to see something like that happen because the West Coast needs a great platform out here. And, I heard that Mark had bought all this stuff and he was going to start a tournament circuit out here. And I was super leery. And I know a lot of guys were super leery about it. We're like, maybe but we're all hopeful that we want something to work out here.
Yeah.
But we didn't know what was going to happen. So I got the invite to fish the BAM Pro Tour, accepted that, had a pretty good year last year. I think I got 7th or 8th or something for points for the year. Saw the forecast to fish some different lakes for this year, and I was pretty excited about it. Pedro, I thought I was going to do better than that. And, you never know.
Right.
You got guys that are, I don't know how much time John Pearl and, Christian Ostrander are on the water, but I'm guessing it's 200 and some days. Like, Christian, I think I overheard him in the interview that was his home area down there. I don't know exactly where he's from. I haven't really talked to him that much, but you can't replace time on the water. And you put enough time on the water, you're going to beat the best guys around because, this, that, but it's not like it's one home lake. They're all over the place. These guys they're guiding on the Delta. They're guiding over here. They're on Pedro. They're in the desert. They're on Shasta or wherever they're fishing. Like, I'm working 80 hours a week and I don't even have time to retime my rods. And so, there's that going on, which is fine. I mean, I'm down here to make money and stuff like that, but
yeah.
I was super excited, and it seems like this circuit is definitely going in the right direction. I just can't wait to see where this is going to go in the next couple of years because I've sure had a lot of fun. All the guys we're fishing against, I've had a blast with, and you get your teeth kicked in by your buddy all the time, but you're still friends. Like you're still supporting them. When I remember watching Colby last year, we're winning down there on Martinez, and I was standing right there, like he beat me, and I was so excited for him. We've become pretty good friends, and I met Bill Ocean, and he's a good guy, and all those guys, Conrad, and Nick Cloutier, Nick Wood, all those guys. It's a really good group of people, and Jason Crone, I'm glad he's down there, and Hickey, he's from Idaho, so it's been a good time. I really enjoyed it, and this last weekend was just an incredible experience. I can't even describe what was going on the stage and stuff, but it was I've never been so stressed out at a weigh-in in my entire life, but it all worked out.
Yeah, you talked about it's beating these guys any one time is an amazing feat. Well, I'll tell you what, Karl, you just beat them all, and you took home that $50,000, the big trophy. You stood on the big stage, man, and let it all out, and it was an awesome thing to watch. Thank you for coming on and doing this show. We're going to wrap this one up tonight. And, in a couple weeks, we'll have another great angler just like Karl Okerman right now. The champ has left the building. All right, man. Thank you very much for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you in a couple weeks.